Hey guys, in this tutorial I'm going to just build a very simple Qlik mashup using React. So this is probably going to be the first of a series where I'm going to be rebuilding the Qlik hub in React. In this first lesson we're just going to get started and render a list of apps from our Qlik hub onto a React application. So do like and subscribe if you like the content, and I'll keep creating some of these tutorials. First of all, in order to get started you need to have Node and npm both installed. So if you open the command prompt, do note I'm using Windows OS so we can access the Qlik Sense desktop, which we also have open here. So you need to open Qlik Sense. So I'm not going to go through the steps of installing npm and Node, but just do note you do need both of those installed. So you can see I've got my Node version and npm version here. Then you're going to need to install Create React App, which we're going to be using for this tutorial to get started with a React application. So npm-i-g, then Create React App will globally install Create React App. So I'll just wait a minute until that's done. Great, so that's finished, and then we can use Create React App and then create a brand new React application, which I'm going to call Qlik-React. You may need to cd into the folder where you want to store that first. So I'm just creating this in C users mantis shrimp, and if I go to C drive, we can see Qlik.react folder here that's been created. And we again just need to wait a second. Okay, great, so that's done. We have created a new React application with everything we need to get started. So I'm going to close the command prompt now and open Visual Studio. I'm just going to not cd, but access this folder, and we can get started with some coding. So let's open folder, and let's go back to C users and find that folder, and we can open it. And we can also go to terminal here and just click new terminal, and that opens a terminal in Visual Studio, and we can run some commands to start our React application from here. So if we type in npm start, that is going to build our React app. And here we go. So that is running on our localhost 3000. Okay, so let's go into SRC, which contains our majority of our code. And first of all, in app.js, I'm just going to clear this file out. Let's just remove all of this. So we've got our app, and we're just keeping this div class name equals app, and that has just cleared out our React application. I'm also going to just remove these, and we can remove app.css. Okay, so we want to now install Enigma.js. So Enigma.js is a promise-based JavaScript library that helps us communicate with the Qlik engine. So do go through the documentation on Enigma.js if you haven't already, but it enables us to create a connection to the Qlik engine, and then we can start loading apps, or even access an application and access the associative data model of particular applications. So we need to first install Enigma in our project, and then we can start using it. So I'm going to press Ctrl C in our terminal just to terminate our job, and then we can just type npm I enigma.js, and we can install Enigma.js into our project. Now, while that is installing, I'm actually going to create a new file here called engine.js. So in engine.js, we're going to load Enigma.js. We're going to open a connection, a WebSocket connection to the Qlik Sense engine, and export the global class. And that's what we're going to be using in this application. And that's going to contain all the methods at that global level for us to interact with the Qlik engine. So let's import Enigma from enigma.js. Then we need to create a variable called schema, and we're going to require a schema version. And this is going to be enigma.js/schema, and it's going to be 3.1.json. So if we actually look in node modules, look in our Enigma library, which is down here, and you can see we've got a number of different schemas which we can access, and I'm accessing this 3.1 JSON here. Okay, cool. And then we can actually create our session. So const session equals enigma.create, and we're going to use that schema variable we've created, and a URL which is going to be a WebSocket connection to our Qlik environment. And our Qlik environment is running on localhost 4848, and we can just add /app.engine data. So just to show you guys that, if we go to localhost 4848, that is where our Qlik application is running. You'll also probably be on the same ports, but if it's different, you can just change that in the React app. Okay, and then we can just export our session, export that global object. So we're going to open our session, and it's promise-based library, which is why we're using .then, and we can return that global object. And we can now use this global object in different parts of our application. And the first place we're going to be using that is in our index.js file. So this is our top level file in our application. So we want to pass this global object to our app component, and then we can start using it in different parts of our application. So in React, we pass data to components through props. So we're going to pass data from our top level index.js component to app.js. And we're going to do this just here when we're rendering that app. So we can set engine to equal global, and obviously we also need to import that global object, and we can import that from current directory and engine. Okay, nice. So in app.js now, access that data through props, and I'm going to console log props.engine, and our development server is disconnected because we were installing Enigma.js, so we can just run npm start again to start that back up. Okay, so I'm running through these concepts a little bit quickly. You know, do leave a comment if you're confused by any of these steps, and I can go through it in a little bit more detail. Okay, so like we have an error, can't resolve engine enigma.js-schema-3.1.json. Okay, so let's go back to engine.js, and it is in fact schemas, not schema. Okay, so that is compiled successfully, and now we've got our promise object returned to our console, which looks good. So we're going to now start using this, and we're going to use this in a new component called app list, which is going to contain the list of applications from our Qlik engine. So I'm going to create a new folder called components, and then a new file called app list.js. So a few things to note before we carry on here. So do note that this app.js is a functional component, so it's actually stateless. So if we need state in this application, either we need to pass it down from a parent component using props, which is exactly what we've done. We've passed props, and then we've accessed props.engine, or the other way, if we need state, is to create a class component. So we don't actually need to create a class component for our app function or app components. We can keep it as it is, but we do need a class component in app list. This is going to have to handle state. Thinking back to our use case, so what are we actually trying to do in this app list component? We need to first pass in our global class, which we've console logged and we know is in props.engine. We need to pass this to our app list component and then use this to access our list of apps. We then need to convert this to state and render on our application. So do note that in React, every component follows a life cycle from when it's created to being mounted in the DOM, or through to it being unmounted and destroyed. So to manage state at these stages of the life cycle, React provides hooks. So these are methods that get called automatically at each point in the component's lifecycle. And we're going to be using two of these lifecycle methods: constructor, which is called before a component is mounted, and we're going to be using component did mount, which is called immediately after a component is mounted. So in constructor, we're just going to set state to an empty array, and then in our component did mount, we're then going to populate that state with our list of apps from our global class or our global object. So let's get started with app list. So we're going to import React from React, and we're going to create a class component called app list. And we're going to want to export default app list. And as mentioned, we need a constructor and a render method. And we want to return div. I'm just going to return in this div h1, and I'm just going to write here app list. And in our constructor, we're going to set this dot state equal just an empty array called apps. Okay, now we can jump back to our app.js and we can actually import app list from components app list, and in our div we can actually return that component, so the app list component, and we're going to pass into that component props.engine. Okay, so we're passing our engine, so that global object, into our app list component. We have a warning here, this not allowed before super, so we do need to call the super keyword as we're accessing state from a parent, and that is now nicely compiled successfully. Okay, so in order to grab our list of apps, I'm going to create a helper function which is going to grab that app list. So right now we're just passing that global object, and we know that we need to actually grab the individual applications. So let's create a helper function here called getApps. We'll pass a parameter which we can just call engine, and then we can grab that engine, and we want to access our list of documents. So we're going to use get doc list. Then with our apps, we can set state. We're going to set the state of our empty apps array to equal apps. Okay, and setting it to apps, not app, because we're going to be, once we grab our doc list, we're accessing that doc list in a parameter called apps, and then passing that into our state. Okay, so right now we don't really expect any change to our application. So we're rendering that app list h1, but we're not actually using our helper function yet. So just again, once cover what we're doing in this function. So we're accessing our global object through this parameter called engine, and then we are accessing getDocList, which is an Enigma.js method to grab the list of applications from that global class. And then we're returning that list and populating that list in an array, and we're going to set the states of our apps array to that list of apps. Okay, so we are nearly there now. So now we need to access component did mount. So our constructor, we're setting an empty array of apps, and in component list did mount, we can actually set our state. So we can call this dot get apps, and we're going to pass in our engine object, and we know we can access that through props. So this dot props dot engine, and then we can actually render that in a div under our h1 object or our h1 tags. Okay, so our render method, let's just create a const, so a variable to help us. I'm going to create a const called applist, which equals this dot state dot apps. So we know we've updated the state of this application. So it's going to be an empty array on once this is created, and then in component did mount, we're going to set that state of our applications to the list of apps we're returning from the engine. And I can use then app list here. I'm going to map over this list, so we're going to return every single application in our list. I'm going to pass also an I parameter, because we do need to define a key when we're mapping across items in React. Okay, that key I'm going to set to I. And then we can render applist.qdoc name. And here I'm also just going to console log applist, just to make that a little bit clearer for you. Cool, so there is our list of applications being rendered on our page. You can see in that console log as well, we've got the list of apps being just pushed out to the console. So you can see all the information here we have about each application. And you can see what I'm looking to access is this qdoc name. There's other stuff there like last reloaded time and full path. So that's why we're accessing here applist.qdoc name. Okay, cool. So that is it for this tutorial. So what we've done, we've connected to our Qlik desktop in React, and we have just rendered a list of applications from the hub onto a very simple app in React.